Part 1, Chapter 1. Humbert's confession begins with an address to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury. He provides a list of various nicknames he used for Lolita, including Lode, Dolores, Dolly, and Lola. Humbert explains that before Lolita, there was another girl he loved, and he proceeds to tell their story. Part 1, Chapter 2. Humbert reveals his background information. He was born in Paris in 1910 to a Swiss father and an English mother who was considered photogenic. When Humbert was 3 years old, his mother died in a picnic accident involving lightning. He was then raised in the touristy French Riviera by his mostly absent father and his strict aunt Sybil, who was his mother's sister. Sybil passed away when Humbert was 16. He attended an English day school and mentions that his knowledge of sexuality comes primarily from French literature, art, and movies. However, his real-life sexual experiences began with a girl named Annabelle Lee during the summer of 1923. Part 1, Chapter 3. Humbert recalls his encounter with Annabelle Lee when she was 12 years old, and he was captivated by her during their travels with their respective families. Humbert admits that he can no longer remember Annabelle's features very well since his relationship with Lolita began. He vaguely describes her as being half English and half Dutch. Despite the lack of specific details, Humbert and Annabelle become friends and later attempt to engage in sexual activities on the beach. Unbeknownst to them, they are being watched by two bearded bathers in the water who cheer them on. Unfortunately, Annabelle dies 4 months later from typhus in Corfu. Part 1, Chapter 4. Humbert believes that his interest in young girls originated with Annabelle, and he suggests that Lolita's story can be traced back to their connection. He believes that the current generation cannot comprehend the intense physical and spiritual bond he shared with Annabelle. For years, he remains obsessed with her and particularly fixated on the memories of their encounter in a mimosa grove. However, Lolita eventually breaks the spell Annabelle had over him, marking a significant shift in his life. Part 1, Chapter 5. During his time in college in London and Paris, Humbert switches his academic focus from studying psychology to English literature. As an adult, he engages in writing essays and works on a manual of French literature for English students. Humbert holds teaching positions and visits prostitutes, but he becomes fixated on what he calls nymphets. He defines nymphets as girls between the ages of 9 and 14 who possess a unique sexual allure, regardless of their physical attractiveness. Humbert believes that nymphets have a quality that only older men can comprehend and appreciate. He mentions examples of nymphets from literature, art, and history, highlighting his discontent with societal norms that allow older men to court 16-year-old girls, but not younger ones who have already entered puberty. Despite his fantasies, Humbert never acts on his desires during his college years and early adulthood. Part 1, Chapter 6. Humbert contemplates the fate of the nymphets he once admired in Paris and ponders how their lives are affected by his mental possession of them. He recalls meeting a prostitute named Monique in Paris, estimating her age to be 16. He engages into encounters with her, but ends their relationship once she no longer fits his concept of a nymphette. Seeking an experience closer to his desires, he visits a procurer who offers him a very young prostitute. However, upon realizing that the girl does not possess the qualities of a nymphette, Humbert attempts to leave. He is threatened by 2 men and reluctantly takes the girl to her room, but they do not engage in sexual activities. Part 1, Chapter 7. Following the encounter with the young prostitute, Humbert decides to settle down and seek a wife. Due to his exceptional handsomeness, he easily finds a wife in a Polish doctor's daughter named Valeria. Humbert is initially attracted to Valeria because she reminds him of a doll-like little girl, despite their similar ages. Valeria loves him, but Humbert quickly grows bored with her, finding her intellectually unstimulating and unintelligent. Their sexual relationship diminishes, and Humbert becomes tempted by the grocer's daughter. In 1939, Humbert's uncle, who was married to his Aunt Sybil, passes away, leaving him a yearly income on the condition that he moves to the United States and takes over his uncle's business. Fascinated by America, Humbert tries to persuade Valeria to accompany him by describing a promising life full of rosy children and great trees. However, Valeria confesses that she is in love with another man, a Russian taxi driver referred to as Mr. Taxevich in a joking manner by Humbert. Feeling betrayed, Humbert contemplates killing Valeria, but never gets the opportunity as the cab driver stays with them while Valeria packs her belongings. They eventually leave together. Humbert later discovers that Valeria died in childbirth in 1945 after being part of a peculiar psychiatric experiment in California, which he cannot read about while in prison. Part 1, Chapter 8. Humbert shifts his focus to his current situation in prison and describes the limited selection of books available in the prison library. He mentions the presence of a Bible, an old collection of Charles Dickens' works, and a children's encyclopedia, which he appreciates because it contains pictures of Girl Scouts. Humbert also discovers a book titled Who in the Limelight, featuring an entry about a playwright named Claire Quilty, known for his plays like The Little Nymph and Fatherly Love, which are notable for their focus on children. He notices another entry for an actress named Dolores Quind, realizing that Dolores is Lolita's real. Part 1, Chapter 9. Humbert's plans to travel to New York are delayed due to divorce proceedings and the onset of World War I. He takes on various jobs, including writing and editing perfume ads, as well as translating French literature for an American university. Although the work is exhausting, Humbert finds pleasure in observing nymphets in Central Park. Eventually, he experiences a nervous breakdown and spends over a year in a sanatorium. After his recovery, Humbert participates in an Arctic expedition where he monitors the psychology of others but finds the job dull. However, the absence of temptations during the trip positively affects his mental well-being. He publishes a fictionalized report of the expedition and returns to the United States. Humbert briefly returns to the sanatorium and amuses himself by misleading his psychiatrists with fake symptoms, while keeping his actual sexual proclivities a secret. Eventually, he leaves the sanatorium and re-enters the world. Part 1, Chapter 10. Humbert expresses his desire to visit New England and discovers a potential lodging opportunity in Ramsdale. He learns of Mr. McCoo, a cousin of one of his uncle's employees, who is renting out his attic. Intrigued by the fact that Mr. McCoo has a 12-year-old daughter, Humbert embarks on the journey only to find out that the McCoo family's house has burned down. Despite the inconvenience, Mr. McCoo suggests another house at 340 to Lawn Street, where a widow named Mrs. Hayes is looking for a lodger. Humbert reluctantly agrees to a tour of the house and finds both the house and Mrs. Hayes unimpressive. He describes Mrs. Hayes as conventionally dull and lacking imagination, and he dislikes the Middleborough artwork present in the house. However, Humbert's opinion changes when he meets Mrs. Hayes's 12-year-old daughter, Dolores, whom her mother affectionately calls Lo. Dolores, whom Humbert refers to as Lolita, reminds him immediately of Annabelle. Despite his reservations, Humbert decides to stay at the Hayes house. Part 1, Chapter 11. Humbert presents entries from his diary in 1947, reconstructed from his photographic memory while in prison. The diary entries mainly revolve around Humbert's initial thoughts and interactions with Lolita as he tries to develop a closer relationship with her. He reflects on Lolita's nymphic qualities and believes he possesses the characteristics that little girls typically find appealing. Humbert discovers that Lolita has a crush on a famous singer or actor who resembles him, leading to teasing from Charlotte, Mrs. Hayes. Humbert begins to harbor hatred for Charlotte and fantasizes about killing her. He admits to snooping through Lolita's belongings, including a list of her classmates, which he memorizes. Although he acknowledges the danger of keeping such a diary, he cannot resist documenting his feelings. Humbert becomes thrilled when Lolita playfully covers his eyes with her hands while he is reading outside. Charlotte instructs him to push her away if she disturbs his scholarly activities. Part 1, Chapter 12. The diary entries come to an end. Humbert describes a planned picnic at Hourglass Lake, involving himself, Charlotte, and Lolita. However, the picnic is repeatedly postponed, and Humbert suspects that Charlotte is intentionally hindering their plans to prevent a deepening bond between Lolita and himself. When the picnic is finally rescheduled, Humbert is disappointed to learn that one of Lolita's friends will be joining them. Humbert also discovers that his room became available because the previous boarder, Mrs. Fallon, broke her hip in Savannah, Georgia, on the same day. Part 1, Chapter 13. On the day of the planned picnic, it gets cancelled due to Lolita's classmate being sick with a fever. Lolita is upset and refuses to accompany her mother to church, creating an opportunity for Humbert to be alone with her at home. Humbert describes the scene with an emphasis on his innocence, using third-person narrative. He vividly portrays the moment when he watches Lolita eat an apple and then playfully takes it from her. She sits on his lap and begins singing a popular song while Humbert rubs himself against her, achieving climax. Lolita, seemingly oblivious to his actions, jumps off his lap. Humbert tries to recall the lyrics of the song, which appears to be about a man killing his lover. Part 1, Chapter 14. Humbert expresses pride in the fact that he was able to satisfy himself without causing harm to Lolita. He believes that he possesses not the real Lolita, but his own creation of her. During lunch in town, he daydreams about repeating the experience while grappling with his conflicting desires of both pleasuring himself and safeguarding Lolita's chastity. When he returns home, Charlotte informs him that Lolita will be attending summer camp for the next 2 months. Humbert feigns a toothache to hide his disappointment and questions whether Lolita will truly be happy at camp. Charlotte suggests he visit their neighbor, Dr. Ivor Quilty, who happens to be a dentist and the uncle of a playwright. She invites Humbert to join her on the porch, unless he prefers to retire early and tend to his tooth, to which he chooses the latter. Part 1, Chapter 15. Lolita is resistant to the idea of going to camp, but Charlotte tells her that Humbert agrees with the decision, causing Lolita to call him a double-crosser. Charlotte explains that she and Lolita have often disagreed because Lolita sees herself as a starlet while Charlotte perceives her as a homely kid. Humbert contemplates whether he should leave the house until Lolita returns and laments the fact that he will miss these precious months of her young life. He acknowledges that he has fallen in love with her, but is aware that nymphets exist for only a short period of time, fearing that she may return from camp as something other than a nymphette. Humbert's excitement peaks when Lolita rushes back into the house to give him a kiss. Part 1, Chapter 16. As Charlotte drives Lolita to camp, Humbert indulges in a perverse act of playing with Lolita's underwear. Startled by the maid's voice, he quickly composes himself. The maid hands him a letter from Charlotte, confessing her love for him and demanding that he leave her residence unless he reciprocates her feelings. Charlotte warns him of the despicable nature of leading her on, comparing it to kidnapping and raping a child. Humbert attempts to reconstruct the content of the letter for the reader, admitting that he discarded the original by flushing it down the toilet. Returning to Lolita's room, he notices magazine clippings on the wall, including a picture of a famous person who bears a resemblance to himself, with the initials HH, written in block letters. Part 1, Chapter 17. Humbert acknowledges the thought of marrying Charlotte in order to remain close to Lolita. He contemplates drugging both Charlotte and Lolita with sleeping pills, envisioning the opportunity to touch Lolita while she sleeps. Humbert no longer feels the need to insult Charlotte to the reader, vowing to be honest. He calls the camp and speaks with Lolita on the phone, informing her of his plan to marry her mother. Part 1, Chapter 18. Humbert and Charlotte's wedding is a relatively quiet event since neither of them has deep connections in Ramsdale, and Humbert desires to expedite the ceremony. Humbert feels unsettled by Charlotte's strong religious beliefs, particularly when she expresses that she would consider suicide if he doesn't share her faith in God. An article about their wedding appears in a local newspaper, and although Humbert lies about the duration of their acquaintance, the news pleases Charlotte. Humbert envisions that their marriage will bring him closer to Lolita. Meanwhile, Charlotte becomes increasingly engrossed in their life together and begins redecorating their house. Humbert notices that Charlotte has replaced her books with home decorating magazines, and he describes her newfound strong opinions regarding furniture, particularly chairs. Since Charlotte doesn't have many friends in Ramsdale, they often socialize with the Farlows, a family that has a niece named Rosalind, who is around Lolita's age. Humbert mentions that John Farlow provides him with the ammunition for the Colt pistol he possesses and even teaches him how to use it. Part 1, Chapter 19. Humbert anticipates that Charlotte will soon experience an unfortunate accident. He perceives Charlotte as being excessively jealous and insecure, as she requests him to describe his previous lovers. Humbert fabricates stories and invents characters based on soap operas and novels to satisfy her curiosity. As time goes by, Humbert becomes accustomed to Charlotte's presence, but he believes that she harbors animosity towards Lolita. He privately complains about the way Charlotte speaks about her own daughter. One day, a letter arrives from Lolita, who is at camp. Charlotte becomes upset upon reading the letter due to Lolita's perceived lack of writing skills, the revelation that she has lost a sweater, and the discovery that Humbert has been sending Lolita candy without Charlotte's consent. Part 1, Chapter 20. During the summer, Humbert and Charlotte embark on trips to a nearby lake. On one particular outing in late July, Charlotte reveals her desire to hire a live-in maid who will occupy Lolita's room, as she plans to send Lolita directly to boarding school. Humbert is both upset by this decision and fearful of Charlotte's reaction if he interferes with her plan. He reflects on his relationship with Valeria, acknowledging that he would have exerted control over her in a forceful manner. However, with Charlotte, he is unwilling to risk changing her perception of him or jeopardizing his secret interest in Lolita, which could potentially lead to the end of their relationship. Humbert contemplates the idea of killing Charlotte at the lake and describes an intricate plan to drown her. However, he admits that he ultimately cannot bring himself to follow through with the act. This decision proves fortunate for him, as young Farlow, a painter, is observing them from a distance. She mentions having seen two young people near the water and starts to share an inappropriate story told to her by dentist Ivor Quilty about his playwright nephew, only to be interrupted by John. Part 1, Chapter 21. Humbert attempts to give Charlotte the silent treatment, but she continues to talk incessantly. He eventually asserts himself when she announces her plan for them to travel to England in the fall. Humbert asserts that not all decisions should be made unilaterally by Charlotte, prompting her to drop to her knees and beg for forgiveness. Satisfied with having regained some control in the relationship, Humbert spends more time in his den, which was once his bedroom, but has now been transformed into an office. He either engages in actual work or pretends to do so. Charlotte questions him about a locked drawer in the small table within his den. Humbert informs her that it contains love letters, which upsets her. She then suggests a visit to a nearby hotel called the Enchanted Hunters before inquiring about his dinner preferences. As he leaves the room, He discreetly ensures that the key to the locked drawer is still hidden within the case of his old razor, contemplating whether it is a sufficient hiding spot given Charlotte's tendency to snoop. Part 1, Chapter 22. Lolita is denied admission to boarding school until January. Humbert feels a sense of relief and begins formulating plans to drug both Charlotte and Lolita. He has been experimenting with sedatives and pays a visit to his doctor, feigning insomnia to request stronger sleeping pills. Upon returning home, he discovers Charlotte writing letters. She quotes passages from his diary and informs him that she is leaving him, adding that he will never see Lolita again. Humbert fabricates a lie, claiming that the diary is actually a part of a novel he is writing, and decides to attempt to charm her with Scotch whiskey. Before he has a chance to deceive Charlotte, the phone rings, delivering the news that she has just been involved in a car accident. Part 1, Chapter 23. Humbert rushes outside upon hearing the commotion and discovers Charlotte's lifeless body. A car had swerved to avoid hitting a dog just as Charlotte tripped on wet cement, resulting in her unfortunate demise. The letters that were intended for Charlotte are handed to Humbert, who discreetly and swiftly tears them up, keeping the torn pieces in his pocket. One of the letters appears to be addressed to Lolita, urging her to find the wool sweater she had lost at camp. Another letter is addressed to a boarding school, presumably regarding Lolita's enrollment. The final letter, addressed to Humbert, implies the possibility of reconciling their marriage in a few years, among other things. In the aftermath, Humbert turns to drinking as a means of coping with his loss. The Farlows pay him a visit, and he shares a photograph of Charlotte, subtly hinting that they had an affair years ago during her marriage to Harold Hayes. Young Farlow assumes that Lolita may be Humbert's biological daughter, which would eliminate the need for others to assume guardianship over her. Humbert reveals his plan to retrieve Lolita from camp and travel with her to either California or New Mexico. He requests that the Farlows keep Charlotte's death a secret from Lolita, fabricating a story about her whereabouts. Humbert mourns his fate while privately acknowledging that none of these circumstances would have transpired if he had destroyed his journal as he should have. Part 1, Chapter 24. The driver responsible for Charlotte's accident visits Humbert to apologize. Although both men agree that the accident was primarily Charlotte's fault, Humbert accepts the driver's insincere offer to cover the funeral expenses. Humbert reflects on the significant events that have unfolded in the past 10 weeks since his arrival in Ramsdale. The following day, as Humbert prepares to leave for camp, Jean Farlow kisses him, and he reminds the reader of his attractiveness to the opposite sex. Part 1, Chapter 25. Humbert's plan regarding Lolita is straightforward. He hopes that Lolita remains unaware of Charlotte's death and calls Camp Q to inform them that Lolita's mother is unwell and he will be picking her up. During their journey, Humbert intends to gradually update Lolita on her mother's health until eventually revealing that Charlotte has passed away. When Humbert contacts the camp, Lolita is on a hiking trip, coinciding with the lie he had previously told the Farlows, leading Humbert to believe that fate may have played a role in this alignment. He travels to Parkington, the location of the camp, and purchases gifts for Lolita based on her measurements that he had memorized from examining her belongings. Humbert then wires a reservation to the Enchanted Hunters Hotel, requesting a room with 2 twin beds. Part 1, Chapter 26. Humbert interrupts the narrative to express his grievances about prison. Having already written 100 pages, he feels uncertain if he can continue. Humbert states the approximate date of this point in the narrative to be around August 15, 1947, and repetitively writes Lolita numerous times, requesting the publisher to dedicate an entire page to her name, which the publisher does not fulfill. Part 1, Chapter 27. Humbert retrieves Lolita from Camp Q and notices that she does not appear as attractive as he had remembered. Initially, he contemplates assuming a fatherly role towards her, but upon recognizing her as his Lolita once again, he dismisses those virtuous thoughts. Humbert informs Lolita that her mother is in the hospital, and they hastily depart in Charlotte's sedan. Lolita asks if she can call Humbert dad and confesses that she has been unfaithful to him due to his perceived lack of care. She then flirts with him and requests a kiss. While they engage in a kiss, a police officer interrupts and inquires if they have witnessed a speeding blue sedan. They deny having seen it and continue their journey to Bryceland and the Enchanted Hunters Hotel. In their hotel room numbered 342, which coincidentally matches their house address, they discover the absence of twin beds. The twin room has already been occupied, and Humbert fails to secure a cot for Lolita. Consequently, they must share a double bed, and Lolita playfully remarks that sharing a bed is incestuous. Lolita points out Humbert's poor kissing skills and proceeds to demonstrate the correct technique, but soon loses interest. They descend to the hotel's dining room, where Lolita notices someone resembling Claire Quilty, the renowned playwright whose picture she had marked with the initials HH. Humbert reveals a sleeping pill to Lolita, which she eagerly accepts due to its color. As Lolita grows drowsy in their hotel room, she confesses her self-perceived disgustiness. Humbert assures her that it can wait and locks her inside the room. Part 1, Chapter 28. Humbert reiterates that his initial intention upon picking up Lolita was not to take her purity, but rather to fondle her while she slept. He acknowledges that her innocence may have already been compromised through a sexual encounter with another girl at camp. Furthermore, he recognizes the distinction between Annabelle and Lolita, admitting that he should have anticipated the pain and horror that resulted from his expected pleasure, expressing regret and acknowledging that he would have acted differently if given the chance. Humbert eagerly anticipates the realization that she is finally his and that he will soon be able to touch her. While Humbert wanders through the various public areas of the hotel, he encounters a man sitting in darkness on the terrace, who appears to accuse Humbert of engaging in inappropriate acts with Lolita, whom he claims to be his daughter. However, when Humbert asks for clarification, the man amends his statement to say something innocuous that vaguely resembles the accusation. The man invites Humbert and Lolita to join him for lunch the following day, but Humbert declines, as he plans to leave with Lolita in the morning. On his way back to his room, Humbert accidentally interrupts a photograph being taken in the lobby by stepping into the frame. Part 1, Chapter 29. Returning to room 342, Lolita remains drowsy, but the sleeping pill fails to induce deep sleep. She repeatedly utters the name Barbara. Humbert joins her in bed, but refrains from making any sexual advances. Throughout the night, he remains awake, unable to sleep due to the noises in the hotel and his own arousal. In the morning, while Humbert pretends to sleep, Lolita moves closer to him and asks if he had sex when he was her age. He truthfully responds in the negative. Humbert asserts that Lolita seduces him, and they engage in sexual intercourse. He explains that Lolita views sex as something children do matter-of-factly, since they do not comprehend the actions of adults. Humbert chooses not to describe the sexual act itself, opting instead to elucidate the enigmatic allure of nymphets. Part 1, Chapter 30. Humbert acknowledges the need to tread carefully, so as not to ensnare the reader's affections for Lolita. He proceeds to describe the modifications he would make to the Enchanted Hunters Hotel to enhance its inherent romantic ambience for his initial sexual encounter with Lolita. Part 1, Chapter 31. Humbert rationalizes his actions by citing church doctrines that permit the marriage of a 12-year-old girl. He also references an old magazine from the prison library that explains how the stimulating climates of America facilitate the accelerated maturity of girls by the age of 12. Additionally, he reminds the reader, acting as his jury, that Lolita had a previous lover before him. Part 1, Chapter 32. Following their sexual encounter, Lolita divulges her prior experiences to Humbert. He inquires about her classmates, whose names he had memorized, with whom she had experimented. Lolita reveals that most of her peers had engaged in experimentation among themselves, although not always with her. At camp, she would stand guard while her friend Barbara had sexual encounters with Charlie Holmes, the son of the camp supervisor. Eventually, Lolita's curiosity led her to engage in sexual activities with Charlie as well. The girls would take turns being with Charlie, and Humbert is delighted to hear that Lolita held Charlie's intellect and behavior in disdain. Humbert presents Lolita with the gifts he had purchased and instructs her to wait in the hotel lobby and avoid speaking to strangers. He inquires at the hotel desk if his wife had called. As they depart, Humbert notices a man who bears a resemblance to his Swiss uncle, Gustav Trapp, observing Lolita while she reads a movie magazine. The man appears to be of the same age as Humbert. Humbert is concerned about keeping their actions a secret, but also yearns to repeat them. Lolita appears disinterested in him and even accuses him of rape, although Humbert is uncertain if she is serious. While at a gas station, Lolita complains of pain and accuses Humbert of causing internal injury. She requests the contact information for her mother's hospital, but Humbert informs her that she cannot call Charlotte and finally reveals that Charlotte has died. Part 1, Chapter 33. In the town of Leppingville, Humbert purchases toys, candy, clothing, comics, and a box of sanitary pads for Lolita. They acquire two separate hotel rooms, yet Humbert hears Lolita crying. At some point during the night, she seeks solace in his room, explaining that she has nowhere else to go. Part 2, Chapter 1. Humbert and Lolita embark on a journey across the United States. Humbert describes the various hotels and motels they stay in during their travels, as well as their stops at souvenir shops to cater to Lolita's desires. Humbert admits that he finds Lolita mentally unimpressive, referring to her as a brat just as Charlotte did. Despite his own dislike for them, Humbert tries to keep Lolita entertained with activities like watching movies and other distractions. While he occasionally allows Lolita to spend time with girls her age, he takes precautions to prevent her from interacting with other tourists, particularly boys. To maintain control over Lolita, Humbert employs 3 methods: threatening to turn the car around to visit a relative she despises, threatening to send her to reform school, and reminding her that accusing him of rape would result in her being placed in foster care with no one else to care for her. Over the course of a year, from August 1947 to 1948, they zigzag across the country, excluding Florida where the Farlows currently reside. Humbert compares the landscapes they visit to the works of classical painters, but notices that Lolita seems bored with the whole experience. Eventually, their journey will lead them to the college town of Beardsley in the northeastern part of the country. Part 2, Chapter 2. Humbert lists numerous roadside attractions that he and Lolita visit in an attempt to keep her happy. He selects destinations from guidebooks, and they drive to these places, although Lolita remains bored throughout the journey. Humbert acknowledges that America is more pleasant than he initially thought, but their limited perspective, focusing mainly on Americana rather than natural beauty or culture, prevents them from fully appreciating the country. Lolita learns to identify different types of hitchhikers and is always eager to pick them up. She often flirts with boys she encounters, and Humbert suspects that the frequency of their sexual encounters contributes to her alluring presence. Humbert becomes suspicious when he notices Lolita gazing at a particular car and later sees her engaged in conversation with a man while playing tennis. Although he allows her some freedom to enjoy herself, particularly when she interacts with other girls. They frequently clash with each other. The attention she gives to others deeply hurts Humbert, even as he tries to make her happy in order to maintain their sexual relationship. His primary goal is to continue their secret encounters, and he convinces himself that he is a good father. Part 2, Chapter 3. Humbert observes that Lolita is becoming more distant from him and playfully refers to her as the Frigid Princess, making a pun based on an ice cream shop called the Frigid Queen. He speculates that modern psychiatrists might suggest that he could overcome his subconscious obsession by reenacting his failed sexual encounter with Annabelle through his relationship with Lolita. Humbert attempts to do just that by taking her to a beach, but he finds that the beach cannot compare to the Riviera of his youth. He experiences no desire for Lolita there, but he believes that Lolita and Annabelle have become blended in his mind, rendering the distinction insignificant. Instead, Humbert takes Lolita to various outdoor locations in nature, and at one point, they find themselves trapped in the mountains with a pair of twins and their mother. Eventually, Humbert manages to escape with Lolita. Lolita has a strong affinity for movies, and Humbert indulges her by taking her to countless films. Her favorite genres are musicals, gangster films, and westerns. During one movie, Humbert is caught fondling Lolita by two women, but Lolita never seeks help in such situations, even when the police are nearby. Aware that he is running out of money and growing increasingly concerned about the risk of being discovered, Humbert decides to take a teaching job at Beardsley Women's College, where he knows a professor who has been using his textbooks. He plans to send Lolita to an all-girls school nearby. While Humbert recognizes the dangers of settling in the Northeast once again, he believes he has no other choice. He feels that their extensive travels across the United States have only tainted the country and left them devoid of true experiences. Furthermore, Humbert knows that Lolita cries herself to sleep every night, a fact he pretends to be oblivious to. Part 2, Chapter 4. With the help of his acquaintance Gaston Godin, Humbert manages to rent a house from a chemistry professor on 14 Thayer Street. The house, much like Charlotte's, is unremarkable, but Humbert finds solace in the study. He is disappointed with the Beardsley School for Girls, considering it too progressive for his liking. Humbert desires a school that prioritizes academic study, but the headmistress, Beardsley, informs him that the girls focus more on dramatics, dance, debating, and dating. During their conversation, she repeatedly mispronounces both Humbert's and Lolita's names. Despite his reservations, other teachers assure Humbert that traditional instruction still takes place, leading him to agree to send Lolita to the school. Humbert enjoys the fact that he can see the playground from his house, allowing him to observe Lolita and the other girls, some of whom he hopes might fit his definition of nymphets. However, his view of the playground is soon obstructed by Bilderschwo erect a fence, but never return to complete the job. Part 2, Chapter 5. Humbert's neighbors on either side are both English professors. One engages in casual conversation, mentioning Gaston Godin and commenting on Lolita's beauty, while Humbert suspects the other neighbor of spying on him. He is also fearful that Lolita might disclose their affair to their cook and maid, Mrs. Hooligan, so he ensures they have limited contact. Humbert lives in constant terror that Mrs. Hooligan might stumble upon evidence that exposes the truth about his relationship with Lolita. Part 2, Chapter 6. Humbert's friend Gaston is a well-liked figure in the community of Beardsley, regarded as a sophisticated French genius by most. Humbert enjoys playing chess with Gaston and finds comfort in his presence, although he personally believes Gaston to be less intelligent than others perceive him to be. Humbert appreciates the sense of security that comes with Gaston's friendship. Gaston's home is adorned with paintings by renowned artists and portraits of boys from the town, indicating his familiarity with them. However, Gaston's story concludes a year after his time with Humbert, as he becomes involved in what Humbert refers to as a dirty story in Naples and does not return from Europe. Part 2, Chapter 7. Humbert observes a noticeable decline in Lolita's morals during their time in Beardsley. Despite Humbert offering her gifts and an allowance, Lolita becomes increasingly demanding, insisting on receiving payment before engaging in sexual activities with Humbert. In response, Humbert secretly searches her room to locate the various hiding places where she stashes her money, stealing it back to prevent her from accumulating enough funds to escape from him. Part 2, Chapter 8. To gain insight into how to handle the issue of teenage relationships, Humbert starts reading the advice column in the local newspaper. The column suggests that fathers should invite boys into their homes to create a comfortable environment for both their daughters and their dates. Humbert jokingly remarks that following such advice would turn his house into a brothel. While Humbert allows Lolita to interact with boys in a group setting, he strictly forbids her from seeing boys individually, though he suspects she may be secretly meeting someone. Despite his suspicions, Humbert believes that Lolita has adapted well to life in Beardsley, and he considers himself successful in emulating the role of a father figure. In bed, after a moment of both adoration and despair in Lolita's cold bedroom, Humbert ponders how he might appear to the townspeople, imagining that they might liken him to a movie star. Part 2, Chapter 9. Humbert eagerly anticipates meeting Lolita's friends, but he is disappointed to find that only a few of them possess the qualities he associates with nymphets. He overhears a conversation between Lolita and her friend Mona Doll, during which Mona jokingly remarks that nothing about Lolita is virginal except for the wool of her sweater. This statement causes Humbert to worry that Lolita may be dating someone, or that she has disclosed their relationship to Mona. He tries to extract information about Lolita's boyfriends from Mona, but she flirts with him instead of providing direct answers. Humbert contemplates whether Lolita is intentionally facilitating other people's desires, a role he refers to as playing the pimp, and he disregards any apparent advances from Mona. Part 2, Chapter 10. Humbert recounts how, on rare occasions, he begs Lolita for sexual favors, even going so far as to crawl on his knees while she attempts to focus on her homework. However, Lolita consistently refuses his requests. Part 2, Chapter 11. During a December meeting at Lolita's school, Headmistress Pratt informs Humbert that Lolita has been behaving poorly, using foul language, and exhibiting a lack of sexual maturity. Pratt employs psychoanalytical language to explain that Lolita is in a transitional phase between the anal and genital stages of development. Humbert is unsettled by the application of psychological terms to describe Lolita's behavior. He becomes increasingly embarrassed as Pratt continues to suggest that Lolita may not fully comprehend the concept of sex and that her actions are driven by subconscious desires. Pratt proposes that Lolita should start dating boys and recommends allowing her to participate in the school play, The Hunted Enchanters. After the meeting, Humbert visits Lolita in a study room where he finds her with another girl. In exchange for allowing her to take part in the play, Humbert pays Lolita 65 cents for her to engage in a sexual act with him. Part 2, Chapter 12. Around Christmas, Lolita falls ill. Once she recovers, Humbert organizes a party with boys. However, the party turns out to be a disappointment as Lolita does not seem to like any of the boys in attendance. As a reward, Humbert buys her a new tennis racket. For her birthday, Hepper chases a book of modern paintings, hoping to share his passion for art with her. However, Lolita fails to appreciate the artistic value, leaving Humbert disappointed. Nevertheless, she does express enthusiasm for the bike he gifts her, and he takes pleasure in watching her ride it. Part 2, Chapter 13. In early spring, Lolita begins rehearsing for the play titled The Enchanted Hunters, where she portrays a farmer's daughter who imagines herself as a captivating witch capable of enchanting hunters. Humbert initially assumes the play is based on a New England legend and considers the similarity in title to be a mere coincidence. He perceives the play as one specifically written for schools, unaware that it is actually a recent work by a famous playwright. Humbert worries that Lolita may mock him for reminiscing about the past, so he refrains from pointing out that the play's title coincides with the name of the hotel where they first engaged in a sexual encounter. In May, Lolita approaches him and asks if the hotel where he raped her was called the Enchanted Hunters. She laughs and rides away on her bike, leaving Humbert stunned by her revelation. Part 2, Chapter 14. Humbert permits Lolita to take piano lessons from a teacher named Mess Emperor. One day, Mess Emperor calls Humbert to inform him that Lolita has been skipping her lessons. Enraged, Humbert confronts Lolita, who claims she has been going to the park to rehearse for the play. Mona corroborates Lolita's explanation, but Humbert suspects they are both lying. He notices a change in Lolita, realizing that she is becoming less like a nymphette. Despite this, he desires to keep her exclusively for himself and threatens to remove her from Beardsley. During an argument, Lolita accuses Humbert of raping her and reveals that she knows he was responsible for Charlotte's death. In a desperate attempt to regain control, Humbert demands that she disclose her hiding places while tightly gripping her wrist. Their confrontation is interrupted by a neighbor's phone call, causing Lolita to escape on her bike while Humbert apologizes for the disturbance. Desperate to find Lolita, Humbert searches for her on foot. Eventually, he discovers her inside a glass phone booth, where she hangs up the receiver upon seeing him. Part 2, Chapter 15. Humbert withdraws Lolita from school, explaining that she will return when his Hollywood job wraps up. Lolita has chosen the route and their hotels, and both Humbert and Lolita are excited to travel. Leaving town, the acting coach pulls up alongside them to lament the fact that Lolita could not stay in the play. Humbert should have heard the author raving about her after that rehearsal 208. Lolita cuts her off to remind Humbert the light is green. Driving away, Humbert asks about the playwright, and Lolita tells him it was some old woman, Claire something, I guess 209. Humbert tells Lolita they will have a joyful journey. Part 2, Chapter 16. Humbert reflects on his perception of the Appalachian Mountains, which he used to envision as grand and reminiscent of the Alps. However, his current journey reveals that they are filled with suburban and rural wastelands. As Humbert and Lolita travel westward, they stay in various hotels that try to appear inviting, but also caution guests against theft. Humbert observes that hotels have changed since his previous road trip. Throughout their voyage, Humbert closely monitors Lolita's actions, attempting to prevent her from interacting with others. However, she manages to elude his watchful eye on occasions. She frequently changes her mind about routes and hotels, seemingly without any clear reason. In hindsight, Humbert realizes that she had dropped subtle hints that he failed to notice at the time. There is an instance when Humbert briefly leaves her in the room, only to return anxiously and find her fully dressed, as though she had just returned. She claims to have been sleeping, and though Humbert suspects she is lying, he cannot prove it and doesn't notice any suspicious vehicles in the parking lot. Part 2, Chapter 17. Humbert reveals that he has been carrying a Colt pistol that belonged to Lolita's father during their travels. It is the same gun that John Farlow taught him to use, and Humbert keeps it concealed in an ornate box given to him by Gaston Godin. He acknowledges that the gun symbolizes the father's phallus in Freudian analysis. Part 2, Chapter 18. Humbert asks the reader to momentarily disregard the mention of the gun. As he and Lolita continue their journey westward, his suspicions continue to grow. He becomes unsettled when he witnesses Lolita talking to a man who bears a resemblance to his uncle Gustav Trapp. Lolita explains that she was merely helping the man with directions. She also casually mentions that she used to struggle with reading odometers as a child, leading Humbert to wonder if this mention of her pre-Humbert childhood is a learned trick from her involvement in the theater. The next day, Humbert believes they are being followed by an Aztec red convertible, but he manages to lose the car. Lolita claims to have misread a tourist guidebook, resulting in their visit to a closed attraction. Instead, they go to the theater to watch a play written by Claire Quilty and Vivian Darkbloom. Humbert searches for the authors, but only catches glimpses of a woman's shoulders and flashes of a tuxedo. In a moment of frustration, Humbert grabs Lolita's wrist, causing her to call him a brute. In their conversation, Humbert teases Lolita about her crush on a celebrity named Claire Quilty, but she denies it. Humbert remarks that while the young forget everything, he will always remember every aspect of her time as a nymphette. Part 2, Chapter 19. While at the Waste Post Office, Humbert collects letters addressed to both Lolita and himself. As he sees most wanted posters, he imagines a film adaptation of his story with his face blending into those of the wanted men. Reading a letter from Mona addressed to Lolita, he comes across a tongue-twisting phrase. After reading the letter, he realizes that Lolita has vanished. He chases after her and demands an explanation. Lolita reveals that she encountered a friend from Beardsley, someone Humbert could not possibly know. Humbert asserts his knowledge of everyone her age in town, but fails to extract any further details from her. He informs her that he has noted down the license plate number of the car following them, but she confesses to having erased it. Frustrated, Humbert slaps her. Later on, Humbert notices that the man who had been tailing them has switched cars multiple times. When Humbert experiences a flat tire, he spots the man, whom he compares to his uncle and calls Trapp, sitting in a car behind his own. As Humbert approaches the car, Trapp turns around, and Humbert's car begins moving. To his surprise, he finds Lolita behind the wheel, claiming that she was attempting to prevent the car from rolling away. Realizing that Lolita had learned how to drive by observing him, Humbert proceeds to fix the tire, referencing the ordeal of the orb, as Charlotte used to say. In the process, he moves the gun from the ornate box to his pocket. Part 2, Chapter 20. Humbert reflects on how Lolita's acting lessons have become a means for her to betray him, but he reminisces about the joy he felt watching her practice acting. Observing her play tennis, however, is a simpler experience for him. She appears even more attractive on the court, and he admires her game for being devoid of deception or wrongdoing. Humbert mentions that he finds games in general to have a slightly erotic and enchanting quality. While playing a game of tennis with Lolita at a hotel in Champion, Colorado, they notice a butterfly between them. Another couple invites them to play doubles, and before Humbert can decline, a bellboy informs him that there's a long-distance call for him from the Beardsley School. Humbert goes to the lobby, only to realize that no one from the school could know his whereabouts or have a way to contact him. Looking out of a window, he spots a strange man playing doubles with Lolita, using Humbert's own racket. When he returns to the court, the stranger has left, but Humbert's racket feels disgustingly warm. Lolita and the other players remain silent about the man's identity, and Lolita expresses her desire to spend the rest of the day at the pool. Part 2, Chapter 21. At the pool, Lolita wears her Aztec red bathing briefs and bra, and Humbert notices a man staring at her from the shadows. He realizes that Lolita is deliberately showing off for the stranger, whom he eventually recognizes as Trapp. Trapp walks away before Humbert can approach him, prompting Humbert to vomit and see unfamiliar colors on the ground. He observes that Lolita's eyes appear more calculating than frightened. Humbert sits by the pool, consuming excessive amounts of gin, and notes that he will be well enough to drive the next morning. Part 2, Chapter 22. Humbert and Lolita move to a cabin at the Silver Spur Court in Elphinstone. Humbert questions his own sanity, believing that his sightings of Trapp in different cars are products of his own imagination. He fantasizes about moving to Mexico with Lolita. When Lolita claims to be sick, Humbert takes her to the hospital, but stays behind in the motel, marking the first time they have been separated in 2 years. Lolita's illness gradually improves, but she remains in the hospital for a few days. Humbert visits her regularly, bringing books and other gifts. He notices that the nurse doesn't seem to like him and discovers a note on Lolita's bed tray, which the nurse claims as her own, not Lolita's. Humbert falls ill himself, but informs the hospital that he will pick up Lolita the following day. To his surprise, he learns that her uncle, Mr. Gustav, has already picked her up in a Cadillac. Despite his anger, Humbert restrains himself, but whispers to himself about using his gun to eliminate Trapp, whom he refers to as his brother. Part 2, Chapter 23. As Humbert continues his journey, he searches for any remnants of Lolita among the numerous hotels, motels, and inns they stayed at over the past 2 years. He realizes that Trapp had been following them for a long time, recognizing the various fake names Trapp used and his distinct handwriting in the hotel registries. The names often involve puns and allusions to art and literature, which Humbert understands were meant as clues for him, as no one else would be able to decipher them. Humbert feels hurt as he discovers that some of these names indicate that Lolita had contact with Trapp. For instance, the use of the names G. Trapp and Harold Hayes, Tombstone, Arizona, suggests that the man is aware of Lolita's past. However, no clues regarding Trapp's true identity emerge. Part 2, Chapter 24. Humbert becomes convinced that the most likely kidnapper of Lolita is an art professor at Beardsley College, one of the few men who taught at her school. Back in Beardsley, Humbert plans to confront the professor and carries his gun with him on campus. However, upon seeing the professor, he realizes that it is impossible for him to have Lolita at his house. In fact, the professor recognizes Humbert and engages in casual conversation, referring to his delightful tennis-playing daughter. Humbert questions his own sanity as he continues searching for Lolita, considering the possibility that she might be in California. He hires a private detective to track the fake names Trapp used in hotel registries, but after 2 years of searching, they are unable to locate Lolita. Part 2, Chapter 25. Humbert constantly envisions Lolita in his mind, but does not dream about her. He donates her belongings to a Canadian orphanage and tries to move on. He spends a winter in a sanatorium he is familiar with and writes a long poem intended as an advertisement for a missing person. The poem is based on the nonsensical poems he used to write for Lolita when she was younger. Reflecting on the psychological processes involved in writing the poem, he acknowledges that it resembles something a psychopath would write. He decides not to submit the ad and admits that he is not cured of his pedophilia. A woman named Rita enters his life. Part 2, Chapter 26. Humbert encounters Rita, a woman in her late 20s who recently divorced her third husband, somewhere between Montreal and New York. Though not particularly intelligent, Rita offers Humbert comfort when he vaguely discusses his situation and approves of his plan for revenge. They spend 2 years together, heavily drinking and wandering from one hotel to another, even revisiting those he stayed at with Lolita. The only hotel he cannot bring himself to visit is the Enchanted Hunters, though he recalls accidentally appearing in a photograph taken during the night he wandered the public areas of the hotel. While passing through Bryceland, he comes across a copy of the photo but fails to locate himself in it. In the meantime, he rents an apartment in a college town called Montreux. Feeling embarrassed by Rita and asking her to stay at a roadside motel, Rita becomes convinced that Humbert will abandon her, and her alcoholism worsens, although Humbert insists she was a good person. He also admits that he may have mixed up certain trips with Rita, but he believes the specific timeline is not important. Part 2, Chapter 27. In his apartment, Humbert receives two forwarded letters. The first is from John Farlow, who has remarried and is relocating to South America after Jean's death from cancer. John had been managing the complex Hayes estate, but he is now happy to be rid of it, as an estate lawyer named Jack Windmuller will be taking over its management. John mentions the need for Humbert to produce Dolly quick. Humbert expresses surprise at John's remarriage and South American plans. The second letter is from Lolita, who addresses Humbert as Dad. She reveals that she is pregnant and that her husband will soon be working in Alaska. She requests money from Humbert but does not provide her address in case he is still angry with her. The letter is signed as Dolly Mrs. Richard F. Schiller. Part 2, Chapter 28. Humbert leaves a goodbye note taped to Rita's navel and embarks on a journey to locate Lolita and her husband, whom he assumes is the man responsible for taking her from the hospital. Carrying his gun with him, he practices firing at a sweater he finds in the car. Despite Lolita not providing her address, Humbert manages to trace her to a town called Colmont in New York. He believes Richard, her husband, is from Beardsley. Humbert showers, shaves, and dresses in his best attire before asking around to find Richard Schiller's whereabouts. He first discovers a location referred to as 10 Killer Street and confesses that he is no longer attempting to create clever pseudonyms for the reader. Continuing his search on Hunter Road, he eventually comes across a shack on a muddy path. With the gun concealed in his pocket, Humbert walks towards the door. Part 2, Chapter 29. Lolita, visibly pregnant and wearing pink-rimmed glasses, answers the door. Humbert realizes that he still loves her despite her no longer being a nymphette. Dick, Lolita's husband, is in the backyard working alongside his friend Bill, who lost an arm during the war. Humbert finds Dick to be a simple man who fails to make a strong impression. As Humbert realizes that Dick is not trapped, he decides against killing him. Lolita informs Humbert that Dick is unaware of her relationship with Humbert and believes that Lolita simply ran away from her wealthy father to seek a simpler life, working in a small town diner. Humbert insists on knowing the identity of the man she ran away with years ago. Though Lolita urges him to forget about it, he persists, and she reveals that the man was Claire Quilty. Lolita also reveals that Quilty had known her mother, Charlotte, through his uncle, a dentist named Ivor Quilty. Quilty had even kissed a 10-year-old Lolita in front of an audience. Later, when Lolita and Humbert were at the Enchanted Hunters, where Quilty was staying and writing a play, Quilty recognized her. At this point in the story, Dick enters the house and Lolita introduces him to Humbert before going to the kitchen to get cold beer for Dick and Bill. Humbert attempts to engage in small talk with Dick, but due to Dick's hearing impairment, their conversation is limited. Humbert realizes he does not wish any harm upon Dick. While Dick returns to work outside, Lolita continues her narrative. Smoking a cigarette, she reminds Humbert of her mother and goes on to reveal that everyone called Quilty Q, a nickname that brings back memories of a summer when they first encountered Quilty at a camp named Q. Quilty and Lolita had furthered their relationship while rehearsing his play at Beardsley School, despite warnings from her acting teacher about Quilty's history with young girls and his near incarceration as a result. After running away, Lolita had lived with Quilty at his ranch, called the Duck Duck, along with his friends. They engaged in bizarre sexual acts while under the influence of alcohol or drugs, and Quilty had attempted to coerce Lolita into participating in group sex and appearing in a pornographic film. When she refused, expressing her desire to be exclusive with Quilty, he threw her out. Alone, she found work as a waitress and eventually met her husband. Humbert is heartbroken by Lolita's story and realizes that he will love her indefinitely. He offers her money, regardless of whether she chooses to love him or live with him again. Lolita initially interprets Humbert's offer as a proposition to sleep with him at a motel, but he clarifies that the money is hers regardless, as his intentions are not solely focused on sex. He realizes that she had never understood this aspect of him. Lolita informs Humbert that she would rather return to Quilty than be with him, and Humbert envisions her saying that Quilty broke her heart while he shattered her life. Humbert hands her $4,000, most of the money he earned by renting out the Hayes house over the years. In return, she offers him a kiss and affectionately calls him honey for the first time. After refusing Humbert's final plea, she bids him farewell, and as he drives away, he sheds tears. At this point, Humbert reveals to the reader that Lolita is deceased. Part 2, Chapter 30. Humbert leaves Colmont and struggles to recall the numbers of the roads he takes on his way to Beardsley. He gets lost and ends up stuck in a muddy ditch. Exhausted, he walks for miles in the rain, searching for someone to help him free his car. At midnight, he realizes he is worn out and decides to pull over in a small town near the Enchanted Hunters. Humbert acknowledges the numerous nights he has spent in various small American towns, and he requests a moment of indulgence from the reader before reaching the climax of his story, as Quilty is already as good as dead. Part 2, Chapter 31. Humbert reflects on his life while sitting in a restaurant between Colmont and Ramsdale. He believes he can now see himself and his love for Lolita in a more complete way. He recalls a priest in Quebec who had discussions with him about sin and offered him spiritual comfort. Humbert realizes that he will never be able to forgive himself for the pain he inflicted upon Dolores Hayes, as he now refers to Lolita. He acknowledges that he robbed Lolita of her childhood and, while quoting a line of verse, understands the connection between art and morality. Part 2, Chapter 32. Aware of the harm he has caused Lolita, Humbert reflects on how little he truly knew about her. He admits that he never made an effort to understand her. He recalls a time when Lolita was moved to tears by a simple but affectionate gesture between a friend and her father. Lolita had once asked Humbert about Charlotte's burial place, and now he realizes that a simple life with Charlotte would have been better for Lolita than the life she had with him. Part 2, Chapter 33. Returning to Ramsdale, Humbert visits the Hayes house for the first time in years. He is wearing mud-splattered pants and the sweater he used for target practice. Although he sees a nymphet residing in the Hayes house, of which he is technically the landlord, he refrains from entering, aware that his appearance would startle the family. He freshens up at the hotel and walks through town, encountering a woman who inquires about Lolita. Humbert lies, claiming that she has married a successful engineer. When the woman criticizes Lolita and mentions her own daughter, Humbert asks if her daughter ever mentioned what Charlie Holmes did to the girls at camp. The woman reprimands him for mentioning Charlie, who has recently been killed in Korea. Humbert then visits his new lawyer, Windmuller, who efficiently handles the estate affairs. Humbert divulges Lolita's current whereabouts. Afterward, he goes to Dr. Ivor Quilty's office under the pretense of inquiring about the cost of dental work. There, he learns that Claire Quilty is likely residing at his ancestral home, Grim Road, not far from Parkington. Part 2, Chapter 34. Seeking directions to Grim Road, Humbert receives guidance from a gas station attendant. He calls Quilty's house to confirm his presence, but discovers that the phone line has been disconnected. Humbert drives through a dense forest until he arrives at Paver Manor, a large wooden house with a turret and glowing yellow and red windows. He envisions Quilty surrounded by henchmen and whores and decides to drive back into town. While searching for a hotel, he finds one displaying a drive-in movie featuring a character wielding a gun. Part 2, Chapter 35. The following day, armed with his gun, Humbert heads to Paver Manor, anxious about the execution of Quilty. A thunderstorm gives way to clear skies as he approaches the house. He explores the opulent and spacious residence in search of Quilty, ensuring that any open doors are locked. Quilty emerges from a bathroom, wearing a purple robe that reminds Humbert of one he owns. Humbert follows him until Quilty, clearly under the influence of something, asks Humbert who he is. Humbert encourages Quilty to recall Lolita and confess that he must die. Quilty responds with puns and jokes while attempting to light a cigarette. When Humbert shoots at him, he misses and hits the rug. Quilty tries to wrestle the gun away, admitting that he did not kidnap Lolita, but rather saved her from a beastly pervert. He claims that the road trip was absurd and denies responsibility for raping her. They engage in a comical and unheroic struggle, and when Humbert regains control of the gun, he forces Quilty to read a poem he wrote that details Quilty's crimes. Quilty critiques the poem and attempts to bribe Humbert with money, young girls, and pornography. Humbert shoots again, and Quilty escapes, running through the house as he begs for his life. Despite perceiving Quilty as a sick man, Humbert shoots him again and compares him to Charlotte on her sickbed. Humbert leaves, feeling as though he has staged Quilty's final play. At that moment, a group of people enters the house, amusing themselves downstairs. Humbert confesses to the crowd that he has killed Quilty. Initially, no one believes him until Quilty himself crawls to the landing, where he ultimately dies. Humbert departs, sensing that he has performed Quilty's final act. Part 2, Chapter 36. Humbert drives recklessly, feeling liberated and intentionally driving on the wrong side of the road. After running a red light, he finds himself in a field and is subsequently arrested. He acknowledges his regret for not providing Lolita with a proper childhood. From jail, he declares his opposition to capital punishment and states that he would sentence himself to at least 35 years for rape, but would not charge himself with murder or kidnapping. He reveals that he began writing the book 56 days earlier and believes that he has chosen the perfect pseudonym for himself, Humbert, as it possesses a doubling effect. Humbert once again requests that the book only be published decades later, after Lolita's death. In a final message directed to Lolita, he advises her to remain faithful to Dick, avoid speaking to or allowing strangers to touch her, and not to mourn Quilty, as he believes Quilty had to die for the greater good. Humbert concludes by expressing his hope that she recognizes that he had to live in order to tell her story and immortalize her through his art.